did tell me I could take an hour today.
Yes. I knew I should have waited.
Yeah, right. So, for those of you who don't know me that well, I am married to a wonderful woman named Jess, and we've been married for a couple years now. When we got engaged, it seemed like the floodgates opened, and everyone who we knew all of a sudden became complete experts on marriage help. The advice just came in, and gosh, it didn't matter if they were married, single, divorced, they all knew what they were talking about. And honestly, there was a lot of good advice. But what I remember most was that everyone said, you gotta forgive a lot. And in my kind of ignorant pre-marriage state, I kind of thought that this meant that when I would forgive my wife, I would feel really heroic. Like, of course I'm gonna forgive. I'm always gonna get here, and like I've battled off all these demons and all these temptations and get to the end and yeah, of course I'm gonna forgive. Yeah, all right, easy, right? Well, 2 years into it, and that is not the way that works at all. Man, and who knew that I would have to ask for forgiveness, right? Gosh, it's just ridiculous. But it honestly just gets really tiring because we're both humans, and day after day after day, we're sitting here in our sins, sinning to each other day after day after day. And this isn't to say that my wife is a bad person or anything like that. I'm not demeaning her, but it gets really tiring. Because when you're living with someone like that, and I'm sure you guys know this too, it doesn't matter if you're married, if you have kids, parents, co-workers, day after day after day, a lot of times the same things come up, and you have to forgive them over and over and over again. And I thought, honestly, that I was doing a pretty good job with this whole forgiveness thing. Like, I'm a pastor's kid. I've been raised with this kind of stuff. I should have gotten this down by now. And you guys are all seminarians. You should have this down by now, too. Come on. But, I don't know. Maybe you guys are tired, too. I certainly am. And I really did not want to do a sermon on forgiveness, honestly. I thought that I really got all there was out of it. There wasn't much more God could do but tell me, yeah, you gotta forgive more. Thanks, God. But thankfully, there is a little bit more that we can learn. So, if you would turn to Matthew 18, we're going to be looking at verses 21 and 22. Just a little bit of context. Jesus obviously talks quite a bit about forgiveness, but in this area, he starts right before our passage by giving a really helpful 4-step plan to getting someone who sinned against you back into good terms with you. A 4-step plan. Jesus. No parables, no nothing like that. 4-step plan. Awesome. The disciples, they've heard all this kind of stuff before, though. And Peter, God bless his heart, decides that it's time for him to get a little bit on the teaching action as well. So, verse 21 of Matthew 18. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? I'm going to stop there, because I don't think Peter's being really honest with this question. It sounds a whole lot more like he's giving Jesus an answer rather than asking for an answer. And part of the reason that I think that is because the elites, the religious elites in Jesus' day, they had already determined the number of times you had to forgive somebody. You had to forgive somebody once, then twice, but 3 times, you're done. Send them up the river. You can wash your hands of the matter. Now Peter knows that Jesus, he's not too fond of those religious elites. He generally tends to disagree with them, so he's like, okay, so take the number of times that they forgive, 3. Let's double it. And let's add 1 to make it the holy number. Super holy. So, what does Jesus actually say when Peter offers this suggestion of 7 times? 22. Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. Now this is the part where Peter probably swoons. 490 times you're supposed to forgive somebody. To be fair, the Greek scholars aren't really clear whether this means 490, 70 times 7, or 77 times. If it were me, I would just go with 77. Like, it's a little bit lower, a little bit more helpful. But I don't think that's what Jesus is getting to here. That seems a little bit too convenient of a, holy number-ish number. But what exactly is he getting at? To find out, we actually have to go all the way back to Genesis 4. So if you want to flip over there, I'm looking at verse 15 really quickly. The context here is the very first murder. Cain has just murdered Abel, his brother, and God is having a one-on-one sit-down session with Cain. Has him on his lap, saying, okay, Cain, I need to punish you. And to punish you, I'm going to have to banish you. I'm sending you away. And Cain, ironically, is not afraid of being alone. He's afraid of being murdered, which is a little weird since he's the only person who's murdered anybody so far. And God comforts him a little bit in verse 15. I'm jumping into the middle of it. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him 7-fold. So there's that 7 again. Now jump again to verse 23. We're just skipping over a little bit of a genealogy. There's Cain's descendants and such. We get to one of the great-great-great-grandsons of Cain. His name is Lamech. And the author introduces him by saying that he has 2 wives. This is the first guy, apparently, in history who took more than 1 wife. I think that's the author saying, this guy shouldn't be trusted. A little weird. But in verse 23, Lamech composes a beautiful poem to his 2 wives. It's a little weird, actually. Verse 23, Lamech says to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is 7-fold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. Okay, so there we got that 77/490 number again. And in the Greek, Old Testament Septuagint, that's actually the exact same number as in the Greek New Testament in Matthew 18. And actually, furthermore, that's the only time in the entire Bible, only 2 times that this ever shows up, this 77 Greek number. So you better bet that Jesus had a little bit of baggage going on with this 77 number that he brings up. But again, what does that mean? Lamech goes and murders somebody. Jesus is saying, forgive. A little bit of a difference there. And in order to help us figure out what the problem is there, I think we need some help from our old friend, Forrest Gump. Believe it or not. Now, if you haven't seen the movie Forrest Gump, you really need to. It's a classic. It's just a great movie. And throughout the movie, there's a rather simple man named Forrest, and he's just kind of going through life trying to find purpose and love. And a common theme throughout the movie is running. And there's a scene in the movie where Forrest has been drafted to a college team, and yeah, you guys know. And Forrest, he doesn't know a thing about football. He's actually standing there. He's actually playing. He's standing there looking up at the birds, kind of like, okay, what's going on? The other team is kicking the ball to them. One of his teammates catches the ball, and usually when you catch the ball, you run until you get tackled. This guy, instead of running, he runs over to Forrest, who's still looking at the birds, slaps it in his chest, and says, "Run, Forrest, run!" He's like, okay, books it down the field, past the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, goal. Around the goalpost, through the marching band, through the locker rooms, out of the stadium, probably out of town. The scene actually ends there. And isn't this actually what Lamech is sort of doing too? He takes whatever anyone's expectations are for this injury that he's gotten, and he just runs with it. He goes past forgiveness. He goes past even getting even. He goes all the way to murder, out of the stadium, completely gone. And Jesus is taking that ball. He is slapping it in Peter's chest and saying, "Run, Peter, run! Get out of here! You can't keep stopping at the 3 mark, the 7 mark, the 77 mark, the 490 mark. You gotta keep going. You gotta keep running. Go out of the stadium. Go out of town. Go to the moon if you have to. Be a little bit of a weird run. But so that's what Jesus is telling him to do. But at least for me, that's not really answering the question so far. Yes, Jesus, I know I'm supposed to forgive. Thank you once again. But Jesus isn't really just telling Peter to forgive. He's telling Peter how to forgive. See, Peter is comparing himself to some really bad models, to the religious elites. They're stopping at the 3. They might even stop at the 7. But that's not good enough. Jesus is telling Peter, you've got to look again at your forgiveness model. It's incomplete. Completely incomplete. The only person who you need to be modeling after is God. The one who in Psalms 102:13 said, as far as the east is from the west, so has God taken our sins from us. That's a really big football field. And God hasn't stopped running. So, what does that mean for us today then? If Peter's supposed to switch up his model, I suppose I'm supposed to too. And yes, you are too. But see, the thing is, I really don't know what your model is, and I'm not going to sit up here and try to go through every single forgiveness model that you might have. So let me just give you an example from me. As I said, I really didn't want to think about forgiveness for this sermon that much. It just seemed really boring, and it's like, okay, I got this, whatever. But when I started seeing that Jesus was telling Peter he had to look at his model, I started looking at what my model might be. And going back to my forgiveness with my wife, a lot of times my model was forgive, but don't forget. Now, just so you realize, I'm not saying that that's not a good model for some people. I realize there are some abusive relationships in which that is a very helpful model for them. But for me, honestly, it was ruining my relationship. See, when I would go up to somebody and I would ask for forgiveness, I would expect that they would take my sin, crumple it up, throw it in the wastebasket. Forgiven and forgotten. right? Out of sight, out of mind. But with my wife, would come ask for forgiveness, I would take it, crumple it up, and stick it in my back pocket. Not just for a rainy day. Sometime when I'm, not feeling too good about myself. But I feel like I really need to win this argument. When I actually need to show her that, gosh, he just keeps doing these things over and over and over again. And then it happens, whip it out, throw it in her face again. Yeah, it may have been forgiven, I'm not really sure, but I really, really did not forget it. And what Jesus is telling me here is that that's just not working. I'm taking it to the 3 marker. I'm taking it to the 7 marker. When, on a really good day, I maybe take the 77, probably not 490. But Jesus is handing me the ball. He's telling me, run, Tim, run. For you guys too. For all those relationships you have, co-workers, kids, parents, siblings, you gotta run with it. Gotta run, David, run. Run, Kyle, run. Run, Tech, run. Yeah, you gotta keep it going. Because God didn't stop. From the day we were born, we have thrown everything we can at God. And God has taken it and He's run with it. As far as He can, as far as the east is from the west. That is the model that we need to look after. So as the weekend's coming up, hopefully you guys are spending some time with some people who are important to you. And if they're important, that probably means you spent a lot of time with them. And you probably will. And that you'll see those sins over and over and over and over and over again. So, try to run after that forgiveness this weekend with those people you love. And show them God's forgiveness that He's shown you. Amen.